Hey there, everybody. Chris Herman here for another episode of On Deck. Today's episode is particularly special to me because my very dear friend, Mr. George Magda, finally was able to make the trek. I'm looking at him right now. I'm supposed to be speaking to the camera on the intro here, but yes, George made it up here to the lovely Fort of Lauderdale to here at the Herman Agency, where we just had a really enjoyable conversation. So I am certain you're going to enjoy this one. And without further ado, it is Mr. George Magda. George.
Yo.
Hi.
Hey.
You know, I always have like this formal introduction. I'm going to kind of throw it away because we'll just get to it when we get to it. But it is really great to finally see you here, Mr. George Magda.
Yeah.
Sitting across the table here. And you, sir, are on deck.
Well, you know, I got to tell you, we live now, you know, a mile and a half, 2 miles away from each other. And it's great that we could see each other face to face here. It's been a little bit, run into you at the Starbucks.
Yes.
And, but you know, all good. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome, man. Good to see you.
Yeah.
I really am enjoying your Miami look today.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, I got to tell you, it's really on point.
Well, if there's anyone to blame for me to come to Miami, it would be a certain someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
And I think actually,
yeah,
it's not this certain someone to some degree.
Yeah. It's
this
that's
certain
right.
someone.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because a certain other someone had a big affinity for the Magic City, right?
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah. No, it's great, man. It's almost 10 years living down here. Can you believe that?
I know, it's insane.
Man, it's gone so fast.
How do you, now that you've lived in Miami for almost 10 years,
right?
You know, having come from Colorado to here, you know, for us to work together for a number of years here right in this building. I know you love Miami.
I do.
I know you do. So tell me, like, let's talk about Miami for a second. What does Miami mean to you, and what do you think about it right now?
God, you know, I one of the really cool things is there's an energy about Miami, you know, and right now is like Hispanic Heritage Month, and people are, you know, I was having conversations about, you know, what's Hispanic heritage, right? And it's not really an ethnicity, it's more a way of life, right? Mm-hmm. And I think Miami, you feel the Hispanic way of life, even if you're not Hispanic. You feel the openness and the welcoming of any place that you go to. People they'll tell you straight up on how they feel. And they kind of welcome you in with open arms, and they'll kind of tell you if you're not fitting in, right? So, but Miami is, you got to be authentic, right? And I think with Miami, you can't really fit other people's molds. I think you really become who you are.
Yeah.
Right? And I think it's there's so much diversity here. You don't feel like there's even a box to fit in because there isn't a box. And I think it's the melting pot of America. You know, it's you know, everyone's from somewhere else. Everyone's from different countries. Mm-hmm. And it's just, it's a city that just has energy. It has a good vibe. There's a lot of things to do. And it's never hard to get someone to come visit you when you're in Miami, right?
It's
I mean,
true.
People always want to go on the boat. They want to get some Cuban coffee. They want to go ahead and, you know, just have dinner somewhere, or maybe go to a fancy club, or maybe just hang out at the beach and take in the energy that's out there on the beach, or play golf like I do.
You know, there's so many aspects of Miami that I like. And if I were to go back, you know, in time to when I first came here, Miami was much more one-dimensional. Miami was like the post, I don't want to say it was like the post-Miami Vice, but, you know, South Beach in the early 90s to mid 90s was when South Beach was South Beach, right?
Right.
And everything in Miami was sort of like trying to fit into that uber hip South Beach thing.
Right.
And no matter what restaurant you went to, it was like that thing, you know, it just, everything had a very similar feel. And what I love so much about Miami now is that over time, at least is from my perspective, it's become a very diverse city, not only culturally but architecturally, and from a perspective of art, and the restaurants have become extremely diverse, and you see a wider array of people and experiences here in Miami than what I remember when I first came here in the mid 90s, which it was still very narrow. It was like South Beach, and now it's not really South Beach. It's all these pocket neighborhoods.
You see that it's kind of moved away from South Beach. I mean, most locals don't even go to South Beach.
Exactly.
Most locals go to places, outside. You go to Brickell City Center, you go to Miami River, you go to Wynwood. You experience different things, different places, and it's you really get to feel that. It's we've heard from someone that said you got to reinvent yourself every 7 years. You got to fire yourself and hire yourself. And I think Miami's done that. The mayor that's running this is a really cool mayor. He's bringing in like cryptocurrency people. We see during the pandemic, a lot of people either were recluse and went back. This person was flying to different cities, meeting with Elon Musk, going to Vegas. He has that young energy of, hey, let's stay forward and let's bring business here. And I think we're seeing not only the big restaurants that migrated from New York because of the constraints that happened there, but we're seeing it's becoming like the cryptocurrency capital of the U.S. And we're seeing a lot of that happen here. We see a lot of businesses from California that are coming in with employees here. So you're seeing different mindsets, different industries. You see these big PE firms from New York that are moving down. So it's just a lot of newness that's coming, and people don't feel like they have to fit in. Like they could do whatever they need to do. You're not ostracized.
It's interesting. I was listening the other day. I think I'm a big Joe Rogan fan. I listen to a lot of his stuff. And he had on a guy, his name's Billy Corbin. And Billy is the director of Cocaine Cowboys, that documentary.
Yeah.
And so Billy's a Miami, not a Miami native, but he's a Miami guy, and he was talking about the city. And there's two things that, there was a lot in the episode that I really liked, but there was two things that I found particularly interesting. One was he was saying that Miami is like if you want to see the future of America, look at Miami, right? From a number of things, from good things, from diversity and all the construction and growth and building out, but also from, we're a city that's definitely going to face climate change on the very front, right? In the sense that most people will say within 20 years, a good portion of Miami could be underwater as a result of all this stuff. So there's a lot of crazy stuff happening here that could roll out into the rest of different parts of the country. But he also said something that goes to the fire yourself and rehire yourself thought, which is, he said, LA is the city that people go to when they want to become somebody. New York is the city that people go to when they are somebody, and Miami is the city that people go to when they want to become somebody new,
right,
and reinvent themselves.
And I feel that reinvent, I think I've always desired to be here. And I think, I've really come in to embrace what is Miami. I feel we could even talk on authenticity. I think authenticity is really what you see here. You see diversity with authenticity that is, that people just have no barriers or guardrails. Everything's good, right? And I think that's what's fun about it. People are here, they do that, and that's the fun part. On a macroeconomic level, you see Miami you talk about the climate change. We also experience it economically because there really isn't we don't have anything in the middle, right? We have either the really great neighborhoods and then we have the not so great neighborhoods. There's very little in the middle of the road. And
apparently Miami is one of the in terms of income inequality, the actual city of Miami is one of the worst in the entire country. From the high to the low, like one spot. And
we see that. And I think those are those things you look at as opportunity. And I think that's when you start seeing a lot of the people, I don't like using the word hustle, but people that don't, that will keep moving and try to make something happen, right? The people that have drive, right? And I think you see that here where a lot of people do make themselves too, you know, or they reinvent themselves to something. You see people like Pitbull, you know, as an artist, but he's expanded beyond just being an artist. He's a businessman. He's an investor. He's an angel investor, all the different things that he does. So I think that's part of the reason that, you know, you really love being here, because you feel it, right? And you feel optimism, and it's all energy. And those are the things people like to be around. People don't want to be around, you know, cities and the, you know, that are in, you know, the old Rust Belt, you know. I mean,
you feel like time has passed by.
Yeah,
you don't feel that way here.
You don't feel that. I mean, you could go to certain parts of town that, you know, that are really rough, but
that's gonna be anywhere, though.
That's gonna be anywhere. But overall, you don't feel time is standing still. You feel very optimistic of the future, regardless of what's going on to the pandemic and what side you're on. There's no side here. I think optimism is for both sides, you know? And I think that's what's really cool about this place.
I think we need to jot that one down. That's a good one. Optimism is for both sides. You're absolutely friggin' right. You know, I mean, it's these are interesting times, right? And the only way to go through it is with a sense of optimism. You have to, right?
Right.
You absolutely have to look at again, it doesn't matter left or right, whatever. Our world and what we experience as humans in the city and in this world, there's some interesting challenges going on right now. They could set people's mind frame back, but the optimism, it is alive and well here. There's no doubt about it. You see it. You know, people here are living life.
That's the whole thing, is when you look at happiness, and I think you started looking at happiness. I think those are those things. It's like, are you really happy, and what motivates you? And we go into parts of town that you would think maybe aren't have the best socioeconomic areas, but you see the most, happy people there, because they're just happy to be alive. They're happy to have friends. They're happy to have friendships. I mean, they're to be able to just get together and have a great meal and talk crap to your buddy, and to be able to dish it right back and play dominoes or whatever it is you want to do. But to be able to just have that family connection is so beautiful. And, you know, it's one of those things that I think Miami in general is a family. You know, when you're from here, everyone's, you start feeling as you're part of the city, and you get embraced, and people kind of dish stuff to you. You dish stuff back, and it's a fun place to be. And happiness is one of those things that really drives that. And being optimistic is great. And people like being around that optimism, that energy, because people long for that. You know, it's and when someone's authentic and showing that energy, right, it's fun to be around. You know,
we both share this perspective, and this is something that we talk about on this show a lot, is just the importance of enjoying community, coming together as family and friends, whether it's sitting down for a conversation, whether it is sitting down to share a meal or have a cocktail or a glass of wine, whatever it is. There are these things that bring us together as human beings that are fundamental to our own sense of who we are and happiness. And, I know that you and I have been able to have interesting perspectives on that from the point of, I know your travels to Mexico with your family have exposed you to the reality of that, right?
Right.
Like that there's a beauty in those simple coming together. My experience of traveling to Russia to visit with my wife's family, it's the same thing. It's those beautiful moments that you're able to spend together, where time suspends and nothing else matters except what you're sharing in the moment. And I think we could probably talk about that forever.
I know.
This conversation.
Yeah. Yesterday, it's a Jewish holiday, and I went to go eat at this restaurant because they just have really good brisket. You know me. I like brisket. I love food. So I go in, and this is also the beauty of the diversity. And also there's diversity, you have to understand and be mindful of other people's traditions. And I walk in, I'm definitely don't fit into the restaurant there. And the guy says, "Hey, just it's a holiday." I said, "Yeah, that's why I came, because I know you have a good spread." He's perfect. You're welcome. We would just prefer that you don't have your phone on the table or any technology. And I had my phone in my pocket.
Okay.
And it was one of those things where there's no technology. I ate, and I had someone come over and just sit next to me and just talk to me as an older person. And I was just chatting with them. And, you know, I had my food and they said, hey, why'd you come? I was like, hey, I heard you guys have good brisket, good food. We just talked, right? Food was great. And then people kept walking in and at the end of the meal, I got my bill. And actually, I didn't get the bill. I asked for the bill. And the guy says, we can't take payment today because it's a holiday. You got to write an IOU. I said, God, this is the coolest thing I've ever. I was like, this is like a throwback to the 50s where you go to the shop and you're so-and-so's. So your word is so cool. You know, having your word to say, hey, I'll pay you, and saying, hey, you're good, come back tomorrow because we can't take payment today. And to stick to a tradition, and to stick to something so fundamental and basic. And the other thing he said is, hey, all these bottles, I sat there and they had a bottle of tequila, a bottle of whiskey, a bottle of vodka. He goes, hey, have a shot. He goes, what kind of wine do you want? Everything was open. People walked in that knew them. People sat down, ate almost like a community. Boom, they bolted. They knew who they were. They just put their name down. And it was one of those things that you just kind of just sit there. You're like, you know, technology is great. I love tech. But it's also cool just to put the phone away, put stuff away, and stop like being so neurotic by checking things on a feed, right? Mm-hmm. And it was just nice just to have dinner. And the person was an elder person, maybe in their 80s, you know, maybe even 90s. You're just a couple minutes talking to them. I think sometimes we move so fast, we forget that the elders have so much to say and to do and to respect, you know, what it is that they're saying. And I think the person just came to sat there because, you know, I was sitting there eating by myself and just wanted to make me feel good, you know, and we talked and chat, bolted. I ended up taking some extra brisket home with me, and I'll pay him today. So the guy just said, hey, come back, you're good.
That's, you know, that's, to use your word from the other day, that's heartwarming. It really is, you know, that in this day and age, that there is still that, because that's what I'm talking about. It's meaningful human connection, in a number of ways. You know, here I'm like, why? I bring my phone in here. I don't even know why. I don't need it in here.
I punted it.
You know, I'm putting it down. Bullshit.
Yeah.
And so, but those experiences, you know, are priceless. It's what I enjoy most, regardless of whether we spend time with my family or friends or in Russia. You know, it's just like the sitting down. It's
being present.
Yes.
And sometimes we're not present. And technology, I think sometimes I get frustrated because I have really bad ADD. You know I do. It's hard for me to pay attention. So I have to really not use technology. I have to put the phone away so I could be present with someone. Because if the phone next to me, I get distracted. It's like squirrel. But I think when I do that, you know, over the last few years, I've noticed that's how I'm able to pay attention more. Mm-hmm. And I've kind of developed a little bit of a codifying myself how I do things. And it's trying to listen better because, you know, it's the most underused tool that I have, or that we have as humans, is just listening to someone and being present. And I think those are those things that's like very cool. When you're with someone speaking, an elder person, a religious person, or someone who's a mentor. You have mentors because you want to hear what they say, and you have to really listen. And sometimes the messages aren't really clear, you know, because they're telling you something, but they're getting you to think a little bit more than what it is where they're leading you down. Mm-hmm. But that's where we have, you know, critical thinking capacity to do that, right? And I think that's where a good mentor doesn't tell you what to do. They get you to think what you should do. And then you mold that and modify it to be who you are in your DNA, right? So, I just rambled.
No, it makes it 100%. I mean, how many times do you have people in your life that are mentors or whatever, that instead of saying, you know, I want to do this, or I think you should do this, they say something like, do you think we should do this? Mm-hmm. Right? Should I do this? How do you feel about that? Right? Mm-hmm. Like it's a way of either making a statement or asking a question, but in a way that it makes the decision more collaborative. You know, I don't know if I'm
because
sense. I'm thinking of a specific example right now of somebody.
Yeah, but you know that's I think you're going down the right path. Is a really good mentor or a really good friend is someone who doesn't tell you what to do.
Mm-hmm.
They tell you, do you think that's the best decision that you're doing?
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes, you know, as you know, I grew up a little more humble, you know, and you know, when I meet with more humble folks, they're happier. You know, you talk about the happiness, and you start speaking to people that have a little bit more money, you know, and you begin to see a common theme that I experience is I get to see a little bit more complaining. And the frequency of complaining comes with privilege, because someone who's really humble doesn't really have anything to complain about, because it's really, you know, they can complain about certain things, but you don't hear it as much. But you hear it where it's associated with privilege, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those things, you know, knowing how, you know, to put yourself in the right situation, in the right place, to manage yourself and to, you know, stay on that happiness and that authenticity.
Well, and at the end of the day, I mean, we all face ups and downs and challenges, but what do we really have to complain about?
Mm-mm.
You know, I've said this a bunch, and I'll continue to say it. You know, I believe you either win or learn. So even if things don't go your way, you know, I'm always making an effort to practice thankfulness and gratitude for the things that are going well, and for the things that are not going well. Instead, don't complain about it. Just say, okay, this is a life lesson that's going to help me grow and become a better person. I'm thankful for that, right? And to shift your mindset to have a sense of appreciation for all of it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because and it definitely takes you out of that position of complaining, because what the fuck you got to complain about, right? Listen.
Yeah.
We're doing well.
Yeah.
Okay. There are people not doing as well. But there's also people doing a shit ton better than us.
Yeah.
Right. You know, and so I'm not going to complain about that. I just want to stay focused on being as positive as I can and in the moment as I can. I know that's overused, but it's so true. Yeah.
You can only control yourself, right?
Yes.
And you can't control other people's happiness. And, you know, there's family members that are negative, you know, older family members that maybe get, you know, they look at things a little crotchety, you know, you're like, you know, if you're a little bit negative, that's okay. That's you. But I'm not going to take on the burden to get you to make you happy.
Right.
The person that owns that responsibility is yourself. You own your own happiness.
That's an important thing. When did you discover that? Because that for me is actually a very recent realization of like, okay, no. I don't need to keep trying to make this individual something that they're not, or try to make them happy or whatever. You know, just that's their deal.
Right.
I'm just going to make myself happier.
Yeah. And I think that's where it comes back down to, when you are you and you're happy with yourself, you bring on that good energy, right? And I think once, you know, there's, I see people that have their circle of pity parties, right? And then when they have, or, you know, even back in the car business, when I first started, we would call them, you know, the circle, you know, and they would be in a circle and they would all talk on crap each other out, right?
Right.
And that's all that was psych people out that they couldn't do something, right? And it was negative energy. And I remember my first early mentor, was a very interesting guy. Part of my job was making sure he didn't get a DUI, but that's another conversation. But, you know, he would tell me, don't ever go in those circles because it's bad energy. All they want to do is bring you down. And I was young. I didn't really get it, but it stuck with me. And whenever I hear things going negative and not good, I think that's my own trigger. And I kind of pull back, right? I kind of just pull back because I just know there's nothing good is going to come back out of me being there. It's just, you know, I've been part of 2 major acquisitions, you know, for work. And there's always people that say, who moved my cheese, right? Mm-hmm. And people give, oh, this is going to change. And of course, things are going to change, period. If there was an acquisition, things are going to change. So change is going to happen, but the only thing you can control is yourself. And you can control around being around the right people, and you have a choice to be around the wrong people. And you know that instinctively. You feel it. It's not something that you have to read a book. You don't have to go to Harvard. You don't have to do any of that. You know when the energy is good, and you know when the energy is bad. And you're like, I don't want to be a part of this. And you could punt. And I do a really good job of ghosting and leaving. And you know, maybe that's not a good coping method, but I think it, you know, for me personally is I don't want to have the toxic conversations.
Right.
And because when you have toxic conversations, it's heavy, right? And it kind of weighs you down when you hear all that toxic stuff that's going around. I think that's when you just come back and you're like, I can control me. And I think it brings back down to when COVID was going on and what the mayor of Miami was doing. And we're circling back to, he didn't go into pity party. He took this as an opportunity to grow. You know, I work with you know, car dealers. Some were recluse. Others took it as an opportunity to grow. Right. And you look at leadership, right? And that's why people like these Newt Rockneys and these, you know, Tom Landrys. I mean, all these great coaches that were ever there. Right. They lead you through a time. Bill Belichick, you know, with Tom Brady. Tom Brady is a leader, you know, and things go rough, he stays in. And he's in those people's face, you know, but he doesn't let their negativity affect him. He's getting them back on board. And he's like, you need to re-engage. You know, when we look at business, when businesses contracted, things shifted. Did you sit back and, you know, do these businesses sit back and do a pity party? Or do they say this is an opportunity, right? And I think we could also see complacency set in because there's a lot of revenue coming in. So why change, right? Because I'm kind of happy making all this money, but understanding that you could be a lot better and being able to shift your mindset to say, okay, we're doing good, but this gravy train is going to run out. And so how do you prepare yourself for the next phase? So it's like reinventing yourself. Everyone naturally got reinvented with COVID and businesses with profitability and gross and things like that. There's going to be a shift that's going to become a little bit more complex in the future because everything's tightening up and we're seeing major acquisitions, big dealer groups consolidating.
Huge acquisitions going on right now.
And there's a reason why they're acquiring. They're not spending $3.2 billion on a major dealer group for no reason. Right. You know why they bought them? There's a gap of opportunity that these people didn't exploit. People are like, oh, they overpaid. No, they actually stole that, you know, dealer group because there's so much more opportunity that they left on the table. Right. So, I mean, if dealers are trying to, you know, this is work stuff, but if they want to improve their profitability, they can do it. They could do it for two reasons. One, for sustainability, or two, how do I build my store to be acquired or my dealer group to be acquired? And am I aligned with these big 3-4 groups that are acquiring stores right now? And what are they doing, right? And what am I doing? And are they going to get a deal if they buy me? Because you don't want to leave money on the table. I mean, it's like when you're a kid and, you know, you sold something and someone bought it off of you really quick, you're like, shoot, I should have asked $10, not $5, you know? Right. So when someone comes in and gives you an offer that fast, you know, it's almost like going to a pawn shop, right? You know, they're going to give you a deal. You're like, oh, this is great. I'm out. Or maybe you're sitting there, you're like, I have some more room. I have some more profit. How do I do an assessment to better understand? And how do I change my mindset? And am I with the right circle of dealers or group of dealers that are having a pity party? Or am I with the right dealers that are moving the needle forward?
Well, you know, I knew our conversation would naturally lead into this area, right? And, you know, so I'm going to try my best to succinctly name like 4 items that I think are interesting to consider. Yeah. Certainly we know that, as a result, not so much, I mean, COVID was a big shift for dealers and they were able to reinvent themselves to some degree.
Right.
But what has happened this year with the inventory has been a completely different thing, right? We know dealers are from a net profitability perspective, making more than they ever have, and not so much on their incredibly tight operations, but just as a result of responding to what is the marketplace, which is high demand, low supply, end of story. And we've talked about this. But you've got dealers making a ton of money, not having to work extremely hard for that, which we know is a potential ground for poor practices starting to infiltrate, right? But I'm more curious from the perspective looking forward, right? Now that this is something that dealers are going to face for the next year, year and a half, what do you think the mindset of the dealer is looking forward into 2022? Is it, and I'm going to sort of answer it first myself just to say, I think that dealers are probably looking at next year differently than they did this year, right? One of like, okay, no, we need to start making some tweaks and adjustments here because what we're about to experience for the next 18 months could drastically affect our business. Yeah,
so I think we're definitely going to see the industry continue to evolve. It's not going to stay what it is today. There's no way it can, based on supply, based on demand, based on economics, based on inflation, based on chip shortage. Just there's a lot of elements going on that, once again, you could control what you can control. So one, you stay optimistic and understand who you are as a dealer and in DNA, right? And you can control your things. But, I'll tell you the four things, I look at, right? And it's 2 plus 2. You get the first 2, then you evolve to the next 2. And the first thing a dealer needs to do is leading a strategic change initiative is going to be, 1, keeping everything natural. Not easy, but how do you continue the natural process of the ecosystem of buying a car? How do you keep that process of your internal employees, your clients, understanding that natural progression of buying a car? You don't want to alter that. You want to keep it natural. Now, as you understand that it needs to stay natural, dealers need to change and take their hat off their dealer hat and understand control has been long gone, from a dealer standpoint. And they need to think about the consumer first. And when you think about the consumer, they need to think about the consumer and they need to think about themselves. It's internal and external consumer facing first.
Okay.
You got to design everything from what the customer wants. And as you understand what the real customer wants, you become predictive in nature. So as you become predictive in nature, looking things at a macro level of things becoming more buy my trade online, sell my trade online, or, buy my vehicle, and you see all these bigger companies delivering vehicle last mile to your home. And they're still facing the natural car buying cycle, but these companies that are shifting are thinking about, how do I market, or how do I think about what the customer wants first in that journey. So you go from natural to what the consumer wants and consumer centric. So they're designing for the customer's voice. They're not designing for the dealer voice. So that's the first 2. You get those 2, it takes you to the predictive analysis from a macro level. So we could tell by predictive analysis, here's the next progressions to digital retailing, to sourcing and disposal of inventory. As we have those macro conversations from predictive nature, the thing that we as industry people we come into third part. We come into prescription. We got to prescribe them. We got to think of this as a doctor, You got to do your assessment. You got to keep everything natural. You got to think about the customer first. Then you look at macro level economics and trends. As you look at those, I think our responsibility and our obligation is to understand those trends and to be able to become prescriptive and solution for them. But as we solution, it takes us right back in the circle of making sure when we solution, we keep it natural and we think about the customer first. Mm-hmm. When we adopt that, there's absolutely a very nominal chance to see regression in profitability and to see happiness with employees because they have a vision. They understand, hey, you're not moving my cheese. We're keeping it this way, but we're going to augment it with some technology. We're going to think about the customer first. There's going to be empowerment. We could predictive in nature what the industry is going to do with these macro level conversations, and we've solutioned for it. And it's just a circle of those four things coming around. And regardless of what we look at, what solution set, we got to keep things, and that we can't change. We can't tell dealer, you need to change this, because people don't like change in general. Humans don't. Mm-hmm. So how do we slowly augment it and keeping things natural and allow technology to change and adapt for us? I mean, years ago, it was when we were buying airline tickets, we didn't want to go online and buy them. We called the person. And next thing you know, it was Southwest Airlines said, hey, it's cheaper if you just do it online. So slowly, the process became natural for people to evolve. And then they began designing a better technology platform on Southwest to buy things on mobile. So they were thinking about consumer first. And you think about Southwest, it's all about the customer. Happiness, right? You hear those commercials, they're goofy, but they're all about the customer first experience. The people are a little bit weird, but they're staying within them. But then they can predictive nature, macroeconomics. Here's some big cities. Here's some cities that are going to show growth, right? So as they have growth, a solution company like Boeing is going to come in and say, hey, you need more airplanes. And the cities of, those places like in Nashville will say, hey, we're going to add another runway. And so you begin a solution for the predictive macroeconomic trend of people moving there. Mm-hmm. And that's where, we can look at ourselves as, okay, we could look at all those things. We could come back in and solution whatever we do. And I think that's how I codified how I, evolved and reinvented myself in the last few years.
Well, because you've been able to have at your disposal the full suite mm-hmm. of solutions, right?
Right.
And so if I'm distilling down what you said is it's looking at, okay, what is the world of the customer? Mm-hmm. How is that changing? How are the customer's needs changing? How do we also recognize that we can't knee-jerk a dealer around too much, right? We need to find the business solutions that help them as naturally spin in to what the new customer needs without creating a lot of friction, mm-hmm. without creating a lot of stress of having to reinvent the business model, right? And then being able to, from your perspective, say, okay, well, the thing that might be best served for this particular dealer might be on the service side. It might be on inventory sourcing. Like there's enough. If I'm getting what you're saying, it's like it's being as smooth and natural with what you bring to what can help them, as opposed to a very specific set of here's the things you need to do, right?
Yeah, and it's hard for me to tell a dealer that is worth millions and millions of dollars and running a dealer group with 13, 14, 20 stores to say, hey, you're doing something wrong. That's not who I am.
Right.
That's not what we are. We are here to say, I can do an assessment, right? Or we can do an assessment, or you should do an assessment to analyze and to go deeper. Sometimes people do a topical assessment and they assume too much just by the data. And I think that's something that maybe with society and technology and social media, people have stopped reading as much as what I've noticed. And they just look at videos or they look at a headline and they read headlines and they think they read the story. Mm-hmm. So the headlines are really to get your attention.
Right.
And then you have to read the story and it has different contexts. And I think when we start doing a topical assessment, we really need to go deep, and that's where we need to have those relationships. We need to be open. We need to be honest. That speed of trust, mm-hmm. If we could really trust someone, we're able to make change fast. When we don't trust someone, it takes a long time.
Right.
I trust someone. I could give them money. You're like, hey, let me have $1,000. I'll give it to you right now.
Yeah.
I trust you. Stranger comes up. I don't trust. I don't know who they are. I'm going to ask all these different things. We do that same thing with business. Say, hey, let's do an analysis, because numbers are non-emotional. And we look at gap analysis, and we look at profitability. We look at areas that, maybe they're underperforming based on a tropicalized report. Because sometimes just because the macro trend is this, you're in South Florida, the micro trend or the tropicalized data is very different than what you would get from a national report. Mm-hmm. You have to understand what the macro trends are, and then you need to get deeper and understand how to learn to tropicalize that data.
Let me ask you this. Let's take it a little bit more specific in terms of the dealer outlook, and from the perspective of let's call the national trend would be, for consumers moving towards more online, frictionless buying opportunities, right? That the industry has worked very hard to meet in the form of online retailing, and it started with websites and online retailing, and we've jokingly over the years discussed the hysterical disconnect between the online experience and then somebody shows up at the dealership and it's just like it's like starting all over again, right? But the industry is working hard to fix that or to improve that.
Yeah,
safe to say.
It's still disconnected, right?
Right.
Because when you look at it, it's not a natural experience.
No.
Right?
I talk to our clients, it's like, true online retailing, start to finish, represents maybe 2 to 4% of their total retail sales in a month. It's still, I got to talk to my wife. It's still, it's still on the showroom floor a lot.
So that's why you take technology and that's where you say, okay, here's a tech. How do we make it natural, right?
Right.
Because the majority of the people are using a component of digital retailing. So what are the components that they're using more of, right? And how do we just make sure that we do really well in executing on those? Because there's intention and there's execution. I had an intention to tell the guy, hey, you shouldn't cross the street there because I see a car racing. But if you didn't tell him, you didn't execute, right? The guy got hit.
Right.
So you could see accidents happen, Same thing with, digital retailing or retailing in general. You look at Chick-fil-A. I love Chick-fil-A. I know you don't eat Chick-fil-A. But
don't get me wrong. I'm not going to talk bad about Chick-fil-A.
But what did Chick-fil-A do during the pandemic? They were opened up. They expanded. They had everything touchless. They're the first ones that had, mobile ordering outside. They had their app working. They shifted in a natural way what they've been doing business with, and they thought about the customer first. They didn't think about what's best for Chick-fil-A. Mm-hmm. You go to Popeyes. Popeyes didn't do any of that. Popeyes was doing great with that war of the chicken sandwiches. COVID happened. I haven't seen a fight yet. It's Chick-fil-A. So you think about who embraced what, right?
Right.
And look at those people that have embraced that type of shift, and they took technology, they made it natural, they still kept the DNA of who they are, they thought about the customer first, they were predictive in nature, knowing that people aren't going to come into the store, but they don't want to wait a long time. So we're going to add more order people, and we're going to have a bigger kitchen, and people are going to move just as efficiently to come in.
All right. So in our world, let's say we have Chick-fil-A style dealers, and we have Popeyes style dealers, right?
Right.
And I guess my question is, let's say for the Popeye style dealers, looking at the next year and saying, okay, we're not going to have any new vehicles, so to say, very limited availability. Used vehicles are still going to be very difficult to source, at pricing that who knows if the pricing can sustain. And service departments that are largely booked out in advance right now, and a lack of availability of technicians, right? So you've got this crazy cocktail of like strange things happening that right now is yielding massive profitability. Will it continue to? And for the technology piece, do a lot of these dealers look at this situation and say, listen, all the online retailing and all that stuff, that's all great, but right now we're operating in an environment where people are just walking in, and whatever we've got, we can just, we're just selling it to them. And if that person doesn't want it, the next, there's a lot of that going on right now. And I realize I'm bouncing around in my thoughts here, but like this is the topic of the day right now, which is also, how is this going to really affect dealerships over time? How is it going to affect how dealers look at their business plan for the next 5 years? I think we're going to see a lot more family chains cashing out.
It's going to happen because, one, they don't have the appetite for change. And it takes a lot of data, and these big companies have a lot of data. Every time I work with someone that's a big dealer group, they're requesting information that is beyond the scope of normal numbers. They're looking at everything. And so it's almost like you look at it from a private equity mindset of, okay, there's capacity opportunity here. There's opportunity here. Used cars, that's another really good topic. People are like, hey, used car prices are going up. They may change. You know what? But the opportunity is buy those, because today's high price is tomorrow's deal. Because the new car inventory is going to continue to be constrained, you're not going to see the used car market take a dive because there's so much demand. So you're going to see an artificial, unnatural increase in valuations, that are going to continue. Now, the dealer's opportunity is, because it's so easy to sell a car, if they continue a natural process and focus on the customer and not ruin that experience, this is an opportunity for them to really become a dealer that cares about their customer.
I agree. I said on a recent podcast that I think dealers might want to use this as an opportunity to really connect and re-engage not only with their customers but their communities, right?
Their community, yeah.
Because the customer base at some point in time has to start feeling some frustration, right?
You're hearing it.
Right.
I mean, I've experienced it, right? Personally, trading in a vehicle where, the OEMs, Lexus, I'll put them on blast. They said, your vehicle needs to go back to the originating dealer. And so the vehicle's worth $35,000, and I owed $28,000 on my lease. And the dealer didn't want to give me $35,000, whereas another dealer said, I'll give you $35,000. But then they just found out that week earlier, Lexus says it needs to go back to the dealer.
Yeah.
And the dealers feel entitled to keep the profitability. And you're seeing that happen, and that's a terrible experience, because other people and other dealerships would pay the value of the car, the market value. But if you begin to erode your customer base by not giving them what their car is and feeling entitled because you have to come to you, that's a very different mindset, right? And those are those things where an erosion of consumer base based on that behavior, or do you go on another side of the behavior where you see other people doing things that are, hey, I'll take care of you. I'm going to have an hour and a half or 2 hour delivery to understand all your options. I'm not just giving you the cars and seeing you just burn gas, I want to make sure you understand our shop, our service, schedule your first appointment, introduce you to the service rider, because we want you here. And when you have a really good delivery, don't take shortcuts on the delivery coordinator. People are buying cars, but just because they're buying them and there's a limit, it doesn't mean you could skimp on that experience.
Right.
And the dealers are making more money today than they ever have. And I'm not saying that because one or two. You look at this from the public companies, look at those earnings calls. They're making more money than they ever have. And the good ones are focusing on customer first. You hear the earnings calls, and it's all about the customer centricity. So it's a natural process, keeping it customer centric, using macro data to be predictive, and then making sure that you're able to be prescriptive, because it's not just having the information. How do you react to it and respond?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and how do you think the publics are reinvesting? I mean, obviously they're buying more stores right now. I mean, they're...
Yeah, you just see acquisitions.
It's acquisition after acquisition.
Sonic
after
just purchased a dealer group for $700 million. And now there's another acquisition with Asbury, which is public, that bought LHM for $3.2 billion. Lithia bought Suburban. That was a big deal.
Yep.
And then you have, there's supposedly another $900 million in the works. And these people have, these dealer groups, publics, have a lot of money because there's a lot of profitability.
Yeah.
And financially, when you have that much cash, you want to invest it in assets. And because there's inflation, there's increased intensity to reinvest, get that money now, because today's high price is tomorrow's deal. So if you look at inflation and many different things and start looking at these macro trends, when you really start talking to these, having a private equity mindset, thinking like a private equity firm thinks, you begin to shift what's cool and what you need to do and how do you grow. And it's not just closing that deal. It's like, how do I look to make sure that it's profitable, the customer is happy, and I'm maximizing every revenue opportunity without losing any consumer experience. Mm-hmm. And because I'm making more money, how do I reinvest that into a consumer experience? Is it things you do in the community? Is it things that you do at delivery? Is it things that you do to bring them in? Is there events? I mean, there's many different things to think about. How do you augment the consumer experience? Because people remember nice things. People remember good experiences.
Right.
People also remember bad experiences.
Yeah.
You know, I'm never going to have Jack Daniels ever again. I remember that when I was like 21. So, so those.
I was going to offer you some after the show.
I saw the bottle.
Yeah. No, you did not see that.
No,
bottle.
I didn't see the bottle.
No, there's no Jack Daniels here.
You did have some bottle. You had tequila. I saw the Herradura. That was good.
Yeah.
So, so yeah. I mean, it's all comes back down to just the basics, and the basics is he's got to be good. He's got to be nice. You got to think about what the customer wants. You think about a really good restaurant. They think about, does that taste good? You know,
mm-hmm.
You know, and does it taste good? And, you know, there's more people that.
And if it didn't, did the person who prepared it for me or served it to me, or did they show the appropriate level of care and concern to remedy the situation, right? Because things aren't always going to go perfect, right? It just comes down to where we started, which is human interaction, making an experience as good as it possibly can be.
Yeah. Sometimes, you know, we don't execute, but, you know, not executing and owning it, right? And owning that you didn't execute, I think, is one of those things I try to change in my own way is, hey, I didn't execute on that. That wasn't good. You know what? I take full ownership. I'm not going to blame someone else. It's me,
mm-hmm.
you know? And I think when you go to a restaurant that, yeah, it was me. I cooked it bad. You know, we're sorry.
Yeah.
We're going to get you another one. Plus, we're going to get you a dessert and, you know, whatever you got to do to make them happy so that they come back again. Because there's margins in business. And unless it costs so much money to acquire a customer, a dealer, you know, you can't afford to lose someone for something so minute as a floor mat.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So it's really just, you know, using opportunities that fail as an opportunity to win someone back.
That's right.
And then staying authentic and staying happy.
I'm going to hard pivot.
Uh-oh.
I'm going to hard pivot now. We're going to pivot out of the business world. I want to pivot back to a story from my trip to Russia that it you'll see where I'm going with this. So my wife's family, they have an apartment in the city,
mm-hmm.
and her father has been building a house for them, you know, for like 8 years, like by himself, like
mm-hmm.
designed it, you know, constructed the whole thing. And it's got a decent sized property with a lot of gardens and sauna and outhouse and chicken coop, right? So while we were there this year, Irviana had arranged a little getaway for us. So we stopped by the house first to
mm-hmm.
drop the kids off and just grab a few things, pull some vegetables and stuff that we were bringing on our little journey. And while we were there, you know, my daughter wanted to show me how she knows how to feed the chickens. And so we ended up in the chicken coop, right?
I knew it was going to the chicken coop for some reason.
I know you knew it was. So we're in the chicken coop. And, oh my God, I'm starving. Can you hear my stomach? My stomach just growled like crazy. I'm talking about chicken. So we're in the chicken coop. And Irviana's dad's in there. And Sabrina's in there playing with the chickens. And we're talking. And I see him. He like just gradually like grabs this like white burlap bag, and he slowly like, and it's like going very slow, and he gets a chicken and he puts it in the bag and he holds it and he hands me the bag, right? And then he hands me a knife. And he's insinuating that we should take the chicken with us on this trip that we're going, because we've got all the vegetables from the garden. So he's like,
hey, make a soup.
Take a chicken with you, right? Now, I know for sure that he personally cannot kill a chicken himself. I know he hasn't, right?
Yeah.
But he's sort of joking. He's fucking with me in a light way, and my wife's there watching, and she's laughing, and he's like, "No, here, take the chicken on the trip," right? And so in my mind, I'm going, okay, I know he's just joking with me because I know that he personally couldn't kill a chicken himself. But then I'm like, but if I have to, I have to. Like if I really got called to the carpet right now and had to put an end to this chicken, I would do it. And of course, I think of the story that you've told me a number of times.
Yeah.
Your grandpa grabbing the chicken by the neck,
just killed
and just swinging it around until it, and I'm thinking, and I'm like, I might have to resort to that.
You might have to. Yeah, he's like, it's like almost an Olympian turning that chicken, killed it, and immediately dumped it into boiling water, and I was like, oh my God, this is where chicken comes from, right? And you're just like, I didn't eat chicken ever in Mexico for many years because I was feeding that chicken earlier some corn.
I swear that was one of my favorite stories you ever told me, and like literally, I'm standing in a chicken coop. I'm thinking of you and that story, imagining you as a kid, like watching this scenario, and I'm like, I might have to grab this.
What's even funnier is, he was like in his almost 80s, mid 80s, and he was running after a chicken in like the yard, and he ends up like cornering it. And this is like an 80-year-old guy gets the chicken, puts it, dumps it. But it's those things. It sounds really barbaric, but we all eat chicken every day, and it happens. Not in that system, but it's really interesting that he played with you and he gave you that. And I could see you getting that bag and the chicken floating around in a bag, in a burlap bag, and I'm sure there's dust moving around there because it was probably a corn bag, and it's just like, it's one of those things that, but it's fun, right? People, it's fun to get teased. It's fun for people to push you, and you could tell it was very genuine that he really cares about it. And
totally.
It seems like it was a very, like, Irvina's laughing about it. It just seems like something that is just real. Right. And I think I've said authenticity 100 times, but it seems very authentic and it seems very genuine. And
that's what I love about the experiences over there. And it's interesting. Russia there's a similar, and I don't know if you'd notice it if you ever went there or not, but there's a similar quality to Mexico. Right.
Oh, yeah.
And it's in the people. Like, I remember when we visited you guys on New Year's Eve one year, and Irvina was meeting your wife's family, and she was like, "Wow, they're like Russians, right?"
Yeah.
In the sense that they're people from the land, from humble roots and beginnings. When you go to Russia, the people on the exterior are not as friendly, but behind closed doors, just as friendly and the hospitality.
The hospitality,
yeah.
I think hospitality is one of those things that I'm first generation born here, and I see my immigrant side of the family, my dad's side and my mom's side, and you see hospitality. What they do is they give you the best that they have, right? And they want to show you, they give you the best. You're eating out of a dish, and someone tells you they only use these dishes like twice a year,
right?
Don't break it. And it may not be, but it's something that means a lot to them.
Yes.
And you sometimes it's not saying, oh, that was really good food. You got to think of what's going on behind, right? And you got to think of the intention and the reason for them doing that. It's because they want to give you the best that they have, and that may be everything that they have.
Yes.
And we loved Anthony Bourdain, right?
Right.
And whenever he would go somewhere that was humble, there's times where that's all they had, and they gave it to him, and they wouldn't eat meat or whatever it was. But they were trying to be hospitable, and they're trying to just say welcome, and they give you the shirt off their back.
And it's an act, right? I mean, not an act, but I mean it's a physical act of love in creating that experience. Because my wife would say a lot of times, this has been made with so much love, and it didn't really register it for me at first. But then you start to really see it. over
the
and over
planning
again.
that goes
Yeah,
in, right?
The effort, you know?
Yeah, it's not just cooking. It's thinking of where those, elements of that food come from.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you have to plan it out a week ahead of time. So as you eat something, you not just eating something, this person thought about this day for a long time. They went out and sourced this from the right place. My father-in-law, same thing. He'll go out and say, these are organic chickens. This is from this place. I know he knows when I'm going. He does everything they possibly do to be a super host, and you experience that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things where it's more the act, and you have to really appreciate the act,
Yes.
and the intention. And I'm glad you're experiencing that, because it's a wonderful act of love. It's a wonderful act of community. And it's one of those things that I think we as Americans are good at, being open and welcoming. But I think when you start thinking about culturally, is, you lose some of those old traditions. And it comes back to my lunch yesterday at the restaurant. It's nice to see things done in a way that is special. And sometimes, I love, like a really great steak,
Mm-hmm.
But I don't eat like a prime steak once a week or once a month. I eat it rarely, not because of health reasons, but I want it to be special.
Yep.
I don't want to go to, a Morton Steakhouse that I love just because many reasons. I want to go there for a special day. Is it a birthday? I mean, we got a special place, the steakhouse down in Miami Beach.
Yes.
So it's those things that you don't want to lose the specialness. You want to keep the special place special. You don't do it just for doing it, And I think that's why you use certain plates. You use certain things. You go over for Thanksgiving dinner. It's that you use this once a year or twice a year for Christmas or Hanukkah or New Year's, all those different events. And I think that's what keeps things just saying, I've become more sensitive to the effort of other people, what they put in. As a human, you're still evolving, right? We there's things I completely miss and I'm like, oh shoot, I had no idea. But the thing about being human is you respond to, okay, I didn't catch that, but as long as you're good with you're good with yourself, people forgive you for, maybe missing something that was so obvious, right? Because you're real. You're like, oh, I know Magda's probably reading something, and I do that on a call. They're like, George, I lost you. And I think you've done that too, where they're like, okay, I've lost my train of thought because something popped up. And that's where, those things that you're like, okay, how do I minimize those, put technology away. Let me not read a computer screen while I'm having a conversation with someone, Let me close down my laptop and be present in the moment. Like here.
That's right.
Right now.
That is the number one reason that I wanted to do this, was just to be able to create an environment to have conversations like this, face to face, where you can look into somebody else's eyes. Now we're probably going to have to, at some point in time, consider doing some online versions of this, because it's hard to get people to travel and what have you. But I don't know. We'll have to see how that goes, because to me, it's just like sitting right here, face to face, and allows you to really connect. I'm sitting here right now, and it's nice to see you. It's nice to reaffirm inside of myself what a beautiful and good and kind person you are, right? And to appreciate
thank you, man.
Your view
likewise
on the world. You've always been a good friend, and it does. And at the same time, I think sometimes I let life be my cell phone, right?
Mm-hmm.
I get distracted. We talk about it all the time. We live 2 miles from each other,
mm-hmm.
right? And you just get going, and before you know it, life passes by, and then you sit down and you have a conversation like this, and I'm like, there's no reason to not have more. In fact, we talked about business for a while. It's almost like fuck talking about business.
Yeah.
It's just like,
it's just. I think these podcasts. I've been thinking about doing podcasts just on general things, and one of my really good friends. You're in my circle of really good friends. I don't have a lot of friends.
Me neither.
I have very few. I have a lot of acquaintances.
Yes.
We know a lot of people, but like people I say, hey, you're, like family, I have friends that are, closer to me than family, and I consider you one of those.
Oh, thank you.
But I think whenever, you start thinking about, just how to be just here and present, and there's stories, and Anthony, our really good friend,
yes,
has said, hey, you need to write a story about you. And I'm like, there's nothing really cool. I tell him, but he tells me, he's like, I think you got a cool story. I think you got a cool story. I think sometimes there's things that, growing up the way we grew up, I mean, growing up in humble beginnings with two parents that are immigrants, one from Eastern Europe and one from Mexico, that has a lot to do with it. My mom came over here, illegally, I mean, that's something I could, and I'm actually proud that, she did everything she could. She became a legalized citizen. My dad came over illegally. He came over through Canada, but he had to leave, the Eastern Europe bloc and you go from Yugoslavia to Austria.
Mm-hmm.
And, he had his travels to come down, and for them two to meet with those vast differences. But you said something that was really interesting. You said Russia and Mexico have some commonalities. I think a lot of those Eastern European countries and Mexico have that hospitality. And my dad always loved going to Mexico. And he goes, this is just like my old country.
Well, it's the humble. I don't want to use the word poverty, but it is the lack of wealth in many of these areas, and people still creating a beautiful life with what most people would say seems like nothing.
Right.
And they're making I've been to the villages in Russia, and I've seen it firsthand, and I've seen people who are genuinely filled with life and filled with love and filled with happiness. Are they happy all the time? No, of course
No,
not.
Yeah.
But you don't get this sense of like, oh, we have it so rough. No,
there's no pity party.
Right? And that's why my mindset right now, for those of us, and I don't want to go into those of us in this business, this is an interesting and challenging time, right? Like,
right.
It's an interesting and challenging time. For dealers, it's been a lot of surplus. For those of us on the other side, there's a different experience to some degree, right? And I'm only going to speak for myself. But that being said, I'm not going to let any of what's going on in the world right now take away from the enjoyment of being able to really live life and be appreciative of the moment, regardless, because this time will pass, right?
It will.
It'll pass. There's going to be some point in time, cars are going to come flooding back. Dealers are going to go absolutely crazy to get things up and running again, and it's going to be.
And there's going to be another shift though, and by like 2030, you're going to see the majority of cars being electric.
Yeah.
I mean, things are going to change, and we have to be able to be adaptable.
Yes.
We can't say, "Oh, I wish like the good old." There is no good old days. No. You know what? Things are. It's a lot easier for me to change a control than when I was a kid. I had to get up, change it, and I had 3 stations, that came in good, So I had the UV, whatever those 2 fobs were. Then I had the rabbit ears and stuff like that going on with the coat hanger on one side of the antenna to get better signal. And, you think about the good old days. I think people were nostalgic, right? Because it's always nice to get together with the good old friend because you think about the old times. But it's also really nice to talk about like where the future is going.
Right.
But at the same time, we got to be present today.
Yeah, right.
We can't go back because it already happened. We can't be post-mortem, but we can't look so far in the future we forget that we're actually present today.
And here we are.
Here we are.
Right here. George.
Yo.
Let's take a pause right there.
A pause.
Until we do this
again.
It's been great to see you.
Same here.
Thank you for coming up and spending this time.
It's been good.
We have a little bit of lunch. I'm starving.
I'm hungry. My stomach just growled.
Oh yeah, growling like this. How did the didn't you go to the dentist?
Yeah.
All good.
Yeah, it was really minor. He didn't even use. It was a very, very tiny little filling. I had a little tiny cavity, been a little sweet tooth. You know me. So but the guy, what was really interesting? I got to tell that story. So I go see the dentist. You know me. I got a gap. I I got, but the guy, I said, he said, I love your teeth. I said, what do you mean you love my teeth? He goes, it's you. It's authentic. And then he said, a lot of people try to come in and change who they are. Mm-hmm. And sometimes their teeth are perfect and I can't find anything wrong with them. And he goes, but you don't need anything. Your bite, everything's good. He goes, they're functional and they fit you. And he goes, and when he started saying that, I really started thinking, I was like, I've never really been self-conscious about my teeth. I know I had a gap, I don't
even know if I've ever even.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but it's you.
It's me. Right. And I've never really thought about, hey, I need to change that. And it's all about authenticity and being fun. And he goes, dude, keep it the way it is. I did have a little cavity, so I need to stay off the sweet tooth a little bit. But, other than that, it was a kind of a interesting experience as I was coming over here. And that's how I got into the authenticity thing, because you always think of like what leads you to a conversation. What are those experiences in the morning? What are those experiences in the day? What happened with the conversation that either got you riled up? Or what are those conversations that make you really loving and warm? So it's just, we could go on and on and on.
Here's to imperfect, authentic teeth.
Yeah.
I got them too.
Yeah.
My wife does as well too. My wife's teeth are perfectly imperfect.
Yeah.
I freaking love them.
Yeah.
Her front teeth have a little bit of an angle this way. And my daughter has the same thing. And I don't know. I just love them.
Yeah.
They're unique.
Yeah. It's you.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's you, George.
Yeah. Cheers to being.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers with our water.
Water.
Across the table.
Yeah.
Let's go eat some. We've got some healthy wraps. Healthy.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Peace.
All right.
All right. Bye. Bye.